Welcome to the Western Bell podcast series, with talks on traditional spiritual teaching and its application in the world today. The intention of the series is to offer something useful for those who are drawn to study themselves and engage practice on the spiritual path. New talks are posted twice each month. The content of the talks is for informational purposes only and not to provide any kind of counseling, medical, or professional advice. This podcast is titled, A Creative Life is a Conscious Life. The talk was given by Karl Krumins on February 28, 2026, via Zoom. Karl has been a spiritual practitioner for over 40 years. He facilitates groups, lived in India for 7 years, and has a passion for considering the essential similarities of spiritual traditions. In this presentation, he says that creativity isn't a luxury. It's a primary function of consciousness itself. He asks us to consider that our life is art. During the talk, art by Jean-Michel Basquiat, Picasso, and the street artist Banksy was screen shared, along with a list of domains of creativity and online photos of land art and cathedrals. Karl refers to spiritual teachings of Swami Ramdas and ideas from Don Juan in the Castaneda literature and from Gurdjieffian Fourth Way work. He considers the impact of Van Gogh's art and quotes and references many sources, including David Bowie and E. Cummings. If there is benefit in this talk for you, please consider sharing the link to it or writing a review on social media or on one of the podcast platforms. Karl Krumins.
Okay, the first thing I'd like to do is to dedicate the results of these small efforts for the benefit of beings everywhere. My aim in this presentation is to expand our concept or understanding of creativity so that we can see the personal value and necessity of creativity. Also, to expand the scope of possible areas of creativity and its intimate association with passion. There's different words that have different meanings. I want to separate out art and beauty from any necessary association with creativity and passion. Why is something called art and another thing not called art? And something that is not appreciated at one time, will it be appreciated as art another time? There's these experts who decide what is art in any area and what isn't. And the same thing with beauty. Beauty is very different from culture to culture. So I want to separate those items from the idea of creativity because it narrows what's possible. And this is tricky because there's some people who are professional artists in one field or another, and their relationship to creativity is different. It's economically tied. It's circumscribed to some extent because of the economic connection from what their creativity produces and what's marketable. Like an author succeeds with the first book, and the first book was a result of his passion, his depression, his anxiety, all of that. And then the writer starts trying to do that again, not what pours out of him naturally, but to do what he thinks the market wants. So moving on to what I consider creativity, I'll give a definition of creativity. It is going into the unknown with intention. And playing is going to the unknown without intention. But they're both forms of creativity. The whole intent of this is really to open up our ideas of creativity and our capacity in that area. So keep that in mind. Passion and play, I call these also absorption, are the two wings of creativity. It's also experiments in magic, because you can also look at it. Something didn't exist, and then you bring it into existence. That's a kind of magic also. Both of my teachers are extremely creative individuals that cranked out various forms of art all their lives. One of them said, the most important thing you can do is find out what you want to be doing the rest of your life. So it's renaming it, reframing it, and recognizing it in a different way. And some people, for better or worse, have official titles as to what their creativity is like. painter, writer, musician, sculptor. I have a list of about 25. As I was working on this thing, more and more things became domains of creativity for me. But there's these big kind of official ones. Then there's all kinds of other ones. And for those people, I don't know what to say. It's easier and more difficult because you have a name for it. Names, words tend to circumscribe things rather than expand things. So art connects you to who you truly are. It is spiritual because it is expression of your essence into the world in some form or another. And just to kind of throw it out, there's things like being a mother. That's an aspect of creativity that is very creative. You're having to come up with all manner of solutions. That's one of the most creatively demanding passions that there are. What we're doing all the time is refining our lives, making finer and finer distinctions in it. The big picture of this is your life is art. And within that, there's many subsets. So anyway, this is an ongoing process. Some of us are going, well, I don't know. I haven't done anything. I'm old. You're talking about something that maybe should be spoken to about young people. George Eliot said, it's never too late to be whom you might have been. Chew on that one. So it's never too late to start. George Eliot was actually Marion Everett. And at that time, women could not be taken seriously as writers, like in the movies we now have. Wuthering Heights, produced by one of the Bronte sisters, and they wrote it under pseudonyms. So many women wrote under pseudonyms at one time, once they were allowed to learn writing. So, and where can your passion be found? In the things that you find yourself doing when you're losing track of time. Maybe you best remember that when you were a child, perhaps especially when you were absorbed as that as a child.
When I started writing, I told my husband that I'm writing myself into being, and that was the experience.
Wonderful. Yes, that's a nice creative way to look at that, to enter that with. Why creativity exists? Creativity as a purpose of the universe. True spiritual perfection lies along the path of your own inherent nature. You have to develop your individual uniqueness so that the divine power and glory may be revealed in you, expressing themselves in an original way. That's Swami Ramdas. It's not about doing something well that somebody else does. There is no well or badly value judgments, but it's doing what is yours to be done. So that's an important thing. Ireland has gotten with the program and they've instituted a scheme for artists. Ireland has made basic supplementary income for artists something that they provide. A world first after post-pilot analysis found that it more than paid for itself in productivity gains and reduces the reliance on other forms of welfare when you just started paying artists to do their thing. Now that's enlightened. A creative life is a conscious life. Creativity isn't a luxury. It is a primary function of consciousness itself. What is passion in creativity? Desire on steroids. How about that as a cool idea for passion? The fuel. Find your creative passion with heart. That's a path with heart, Don Juan. He talks about it as a path with heart. What is your path with heart? And I want to expand that it may be different things at different times. And some people have an overriding thing that's they're born into the world having to do things, and other people will pick up and drop different things at different phases of their life. And circumstances may challenge this. It is written that we were created in the likeness or image of our Creator. So we also have the capacity to be creative, to be a creator to ourselves. Practically, we are meant to be creators of ourselves. Otherwise, we're soft robots. We're just going through life, running out our conditioning. What happened to us as children in our household and school, parents, teachers, the culture. Those are all the things that say, be like this. That's how you fit into being a good citizen and a good economic unit. If you think about it, we have a creation that we're in. This is argued in some areas whether there was a creator or not, but here we are. And we have thoughts, and from our thoughts, writing comes. Almost anything that gets created first is an idea in your head. Where does that come from? We can speculate about it. There's various possibilities. But anyway, then we can bring it forth into the world. From where there was nothing, then there can be what you want to bring forth, what you want to create. And the idea of, again, beauty and art, park those. If it's fun, then you're headed in the right direction. If it absorbs you, then you're headed in the right direction. And if you're a writer, I consider writing like one of the most difficult creative paths. You do it alone. You don't have a result for a very long time. Nobody may ever look at your result. It doesn't matter. And one of my assertions is that the result doesn't matter. It's the process. And in the process, there's certain energies that are being produced. When you're fully absorbed and engaged, you're in the moment, you're in your body, you're integrated. When you're in that condition, you're producing certain your energies into the universe, very refined energies that the universe supposedly needs, depending on if you're a Gurdjieff fourth the way person. Anyway, that's actually the main payoff, and you get transformed out of this, and the universe benefits by this. And the result of your creativity is icing on the cake. That's a good thing to remember, because and then you don't need to get obsessed as to whether the world recognizes you or not. The world did not recognize Van Gogh. The world did not recognize Van Gogh. Did that stop him? So many people that the world has not recognized. Did that stop them? And we are so benefited by this. In fact, the world recognizing you is almost like a ball and chain to continue being creative in spite of this recognition, and then an expectation as to you're going to do more of the same. I lived in Taos, which is a major visual art community, and I was talking to a lady, and she said that she was producing a certain kind of work, and she had a gallery carrying her work in Denver. And she started doing different work, and the gallery owner told her, we can't carry that because it doesn't look like your work. It won't sell. So she had to change her name and presenting it to other galleries. That's the art world for you. Early on, I separated art and beauty from creativity, passion, and play. By the way, I went to art school in New York to have these specialty high schools, and I tested to have artistic talent, and I went there. And look at me, I did nothing with it. If they had had art therapy, that I could have used. I was a confused young man. I think I would have gone into lettering because I was really into that. Letters have so much visual possibility to them, but I had to take architecture to make my peace in my family life. And that was okay. That was foreboding of my future there. Yeah, art is a kind of divine communication. Creating is a kind of prayer. Your thoughts are prayers. That's another way to frame it. Art is sustenance. It's necessary as humans, unextinguishable need to feel, perform, express in any circumstance. This creative brain and nervous system of ours is what separates us from animals. We can't not use it. We must continue to use it in the face of all efforts to stymie it. To turn away from art is to turn away from being human. Our humanity is exactly what we need right now. Creativity, not mechanicality. So I have a question point here. What does this mean practically? How is creativity showing up in your life? Here, let me give you a very small example of this. I go to a meeting weekly. And at this meeting, they always have you fill out a name tag. Every week, I got to do this. After a few weeks, I started looking at it and doing it with weird lettering. My art style tends to go to Bauhaus. That's my architectural training into Bauhaus. Bauhaus means straight lines. It's a certain style. But anyway, I started doing these things just because this is an opportunity to see what I can create. And people started going, oh, that's really different. That's nice. That's a small area of creativity.
You're talking about creativity beginning from thought, but what about in certain modes of dance? I think that's not necessarily thought. I think it's in the body and then the development of that from there. I mean, of course, there are choreographed dances, but I think it's not always a thought that creates the art.
Yeah, potters working with clay, with their hands. Many forms of creativity are evolving in the moment. Even the thought thing, as I said earlier, it's the energies being produced during the creative process that are transforming the creator and feeding the universe.
Yeah, so I think creativity is such a natural function of being human that I find it's more fruitful to just look at all what's resisting creativity and work to eliminate the resistances to it. And then creative possibilities opens up. So I tend to put most of my attention on not trying to be creative, but working to remove the obstructions that are in me to creativity.
That's another way to go. Bandhu is a professional glass artist. So he's in a little different category than an amateur doodler. Oh, I was going to do this quote of Charles Bukowski about writers. He said, don't be a writer unless you will die if you don't write. I went like, writing that's a tough gig because you're looking at a blank piece of paper. Because of my so-called background as a visual artist, and I lived in Taos, I put up an ad somewhere saying I would do handyman work for an artist if they taught me to do art. And this lady contacted me and I did the work at her house. And then she would have paper and she would say, okay, it's time to do that. And I would look at that blank piece of paper. I'd look around and say, is there anything else you need fixed today at the house that I haven't done? It was frightening to see a blank sheet of paper for me.
Well, that's what I was talking about, the resistance. That's not just about art. It's about anything in life where we have a creative opportunity or a creative challenge that we have to meet. And so often it's our resistance that wins out.
Yeah, that's why I said passion and play, because when something's a passion, sometimes it can't be stopped. It'll show up. And children, I saw this art exhibit in New York of the artwork of children that was in some bank. And I was looking at it and going, I couldn't do anything this good. I could see by the movement and lines was so spontaneous. And my stuff all tends to be, as I said, Bauhaus, all straight, angular, carefully. The architecture study just ruined me or something. Uptight is what that shows. And so be it. And about dance, aside from professional dance, there's a thing in town called soul dance, which is ecstatic dance. They put on music and people just move around as the music moves them. And the one rule is don't speak to anybody and people just wiggle and wobble around to their heart's content. And so there's a lot of different mediums of expression.
I'm finding I have to learn to communicate what I've learned in life. And I love the challenge of talking to people that haven't had my experience and being able to translate my own experience into words that will be understood. It's incredibly creative. I can feel the warmth of it. It's really a nice challenge for me.
Okay, thank you.
I've been enjoying appreciating the creativity of my housemate in the garden. I have my own zones of creativity, and he has his own zones of creativity. But he tends to be in tune with the earth and the soil and the bark. And he takes these sticks that he carefully crafts and he sets them up for the plants. It's beautiful. He's just very busy working on it and cultivating the soil in ways that he finds enrichment of the soil enriches him as well. And it's just so interesting to me to watch other people being creative and the mediums they choose. Like you said before, it's not just being an artist or a painter or a writer. It goes beyond that.
The term alchemy came up for me. I think of the times where I feel like I've accessed some creativity. It didn't have a lot to do with my cognitive mind. It came through this space of heartfulness and love and attention. And it was more like a mood, I would say, than anything I cognitively created. It came through me rather than anything I could claim ownership over. So, it just feels very magical and alchemical.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is what I hope to hear, that there's such possible variation and possibility in this idea of creativity. Also, Indian storytellers who pass along stories from generation to generation are told to change the story, making it their own. That's how history is passed on in some cultures. I don't think that the Buddhist sutras and the Vedas, they were told to change them to make it your own. But Indian storytellers, so I've heard, are told to change elements in the story so that you own the story. I thought that was interesting. And another quote, you need to learn to be creative so you can work creatively, not robotically. Creativity versus mechanicality in another category here. It's risk, going into the unknown. Creativity is the opposite of mechanicality, and it's a risk-taking. Van Gogh exalted in risk as a crucible of the creative life, something from a biography of his. David Bowie urged young artists to always go a little further into the water than you feel you're capable of being in. Risk, again. E. Cummings, unlearn to know yourself. Creativity as rebellion. The opposite of war isn't peace, it's creation. That's from the play Rent. That's why art is one of the first things to be censored or banned in totalitarian regimes. Those opposed to creativity expose their desire to control and suppress your spirit. Creative people are the people who draw outside the lines. And society is all about staying in the lines. We live in a culture of consumption. Our attention is the prime commodity. Our attention is being robbed. How? We are being conditioned, trained to rely on experts, losing our sense of agency and responsibility. Research is my art form, my passion. What a strange thing. It took me a while to figure it out and get on board with it, to understand it consciously. But anyway, how is our attention being robbed in this culture?
I think other people's creativity, like television, it's highly creative. And yet I just piggyback on someone else's creativity.
Entertainment. Yeah, they know that. And they stick loads of commercials in there because you're in zombie state. Scientific studies show that the brain, when you're reading, is acting as if those things are happening for yourself. The centers of the brain are lighting up as if you're doing that. So when you're watching things, you're like engaged and your critical faculty isn't there. So it's a great time to sell you stuff, to present stuff, because you're not on guard.
Your question regarding what way is our creativity being siphoned or robbed. One thing that's going on that's really impacting right now is AI. I've seen art shows on YouTube. I mean, these were international art shows, and some woman submitted a painting that was actually an AI presentation. And AI stories, books, writings. I never thought I would see the day that writers were becoming passé because AI could do it better. And people argue, oh, but there's no soul, but a lot of writers aren't to the level where they're injecting soul anyway. So I find AI as a danger to creativity, but the general public seems to be accepting a lot of its wares without being aware that they are not done by humans.
Thank you. I have another perspective on that that's different. AI is a tool, and how tools get used depends on people, on the person. And AI has a potential for creativity. I've seen some great stuff on YouTube, people using AI. They're telling a story and then they use AI to keep you visually entertained and engaged. And it isn't either or. What you're saying is correct also. Like many things, there's shades of gray. It's not black and white. Any other things about what's robbing our attention? How about these little things? I held up a smartphone for those people who are on telephone calls.
Yeah, when we went to a seminar with Robert Svoboda, the Ayurvedic doctor and the writer and so on, he called them handheld psychic vampires.
Yeah.
Yes. Again, it's a tool. And for somebody stranded somewhere, it's a life-saving tool. But what's happened to it, how it's being used, is not very useful. Reowning your creativity is an act of rebellion. Creatives don't leave the world the way they found it. William Blake, art is the most valiant way to complain. Objective aesthetics and beauty. Beauty is dependent on ugliness with plainness in the middle. This might be a good time to show art in the commercial art world. If you can do a screen share of Jean-Michel Basquiat. Every one of these paintings here is over $1 million. This stuff looks like it was created by an angry junior high school student in art class. The guy's not alive anymore, so no more are forthcoming. Okay, this is the stuff that the art world celebrates. And I don't know, would anybody want one of these in their house, in their living room? And there's people on phone lines here that aren't seeing these things. Could you do the Guernica? This is Guernica, one of the most famous paintings done by Picasso. It's in a museum in Spain. It is 11 foot by 26 feet. That's the size of that canvas. How about putting that up in your living room, folks? This is art, high art, priceless. These are examples of art and beauty in some world. So if we can get back to the participants, thank you. Find beauty and make beauty. It can be found and you can make it. Beauty is in the mind of the beholder. Beginner's mind sees beauty. Artists, professional artists, that's hard to keep the beginner's mind. Beauty isn't forced. There seems to be a thing of objective beauty. Beauty is the key of the universe. There's fractal patterns. If you look at fractals, they're beautiful. They show beautiful and functional structures emerge from simple underlying and universal rules rather than random chaos. The universe is organized as beautiful. A sense of objective aesthetics. This is hard to define, but easy to get across in the form of music, theater, painting, sculpture, jewelry, paper, art, dance, and a wide variety of other endeavors. The caveat to that is that it depends on the viewer. And I have another quote. What is elegance? Art in your life. A teacher of mine said, an elegant life is a life without complaint. I like that. Your life can be art. Someone said to create objective art is worth a lifetime. Most easily seen in music, like Pachelbel's Canon in C major, Samuel Barber's Adagio for strings, Bach's Toccata and Fugue, poetry of E. E. Cummings. That's very subjective. Charles Bukowski, he sells the second most number of books after Rumi, and all the Rumi we read is translations by Coleman Barks. Emily Dickinson's poems seem to last the test of time. Shakespeare, there's thousands of words from his plays in our language. I saw a Van Gogh exhibit when I was living in New York. A whole bunch of paintings were traveling around the world. And that stuff was alive. It was amazing. I looked at it and it was like vibrating or talking to me. Van Gogh has a lot of press and it's deserved. Somebody talked me into driving them to Phoenix to see something like a Van Gogh light show where they have big rooms that they project all of Van Gogh's paintings on the walls. And you walk through these huge, big, dark rooms with Van Gogh's paintings on them. And I went in there, I thought, this is horrible. Maybe because I had the experience of seeing real Van Goghs live. I saw a sketch of Van Gogh's in a thrift store, like across the store, and it like zapped me. And I went, who did that? And I went over to it and was looking at it. It wasn't signed. And I was going, who on earth could have done that? And it turned out to be a Van Gogh. That guy put his soul in his work.
Yeah, so this whole idea of something objective in art, many years ago, somebody told me to go to the Museum of Rodin in Paris, into the room where there were sculptures by Camille Claudel, who was his apprentice and companion. I fainted, actually. I crumpled onto the floor. I mean, I didn't know who she was. It was the first time I'd seen her work. But it so overpowered me that my body just dropped. I couldn't sustain it. I was literally on the floor. So those things happen with art like that.
Thank you. Yeah. I've been to the Rodin Museum and I've seen Rodin's work and Claudet's work. And I didn't faint, but I went like, she's every bit as good, if not better than this guy. Yeah. So the idea of objective art gets kind of iffy and controversial. I don't want to go into too much. How is creativity showing up in your life? If you find the right medium for you, obsession can become the driving force in your life. It is not about impressing anyone. It's about feeling depth and beauty and growth. It's like being in love. It has that possibility if you find the right medium. That thing that absorbs you, you start and you don't know how much time has gone by. The next thing is framing and reframing art. In photography, it's all a matter of how you frame things. So another part of seeing beauty is framing. Visual artists are great with this, especially photographers, because it's composition and they make something really interesting by how close it is, how big, all sorts of ways of framing something. They can make a very prosaic seeming subject exciting, wondrous, because of the way they frame it. And that's a sensitivity, reframing. I'm speaking only about visual art here. It's very much about how you frame things. And if you step back on that, isn't that what you can do with life, with situations in life? You can frame a difficult situation. You can frame it as a problem that you want to get past or as a challenge that you're going to meet creatively and see what happens between you and the challenge. The idea of framing is really huge. And I think its main import is how you frame your life as a whole and aspects of it as you're moving through it. Are you going to frame it as problems that you want to swipe away? There's a horror of cell phone dating, swiping. Are you going to live your life trying to swipe certain issues that you don't like away? Or are you going to face them with all your attention? All we have as beings is presence and attention. When you give your attention to something, that's loving. Being present, that's a form of love. So you're going to go through life giving your attention to people that you're meeting instead of going, wait a second, I've got to get to and figuring out how you can get away from them. I know these things because I have practiced these. Efficiency is the enemy of magic. That's another wonderful idea. Creativity starts where logic stops. I don't even agree with that exactly. Transformation is not about momentary phenomena. It's about who we become after a lifetime of practice. The aim of the path is to become a complete human being, involving relationships, the appreciation of beauty, and empathy for the suffering of others. It is your life as art. Language in our culture makes us so goal-oriented, so wanting for things to be complete. Have a sentence as a completed sentence with a dot at the end. And really, creativity is like opening the door to a room where you don't know what's going to happen. It's the opposite of security, of having things settled. It's the open question. I love questions because they're like open doors. Who knows where they're going to lead? They're possibility, as opposed to answers, which are like, okay, we're done. Next. That's an important thing, to be open to incompletion, to things being unsettled. Some of us had wisdom guides that really leaned on this with us very strongly. And somebody told me about Yogi Ram Sarat Kumar. He gave you no place to hang your hat, no place to have a fixed identity. And then there's creativity is healing. Art making has extensive mental and physical health benefits. When we play, make something, our cortisol levels drop, inflammation goes down, pain levels go down. This is scientific research. Experiencing art heals. I find going to museums, good museums, an incredible meal. Making art gives you agency in a world where we have little control. Creativity is our power to enact change in a world that keeps trying to rob us of our agency and tell us to trust the experts, the government, whoever you're willing to surrender your agency to. Artists bring order to the chaos we are currently experiencing. Some writers, something is coming through it. Some of them say that when the story's coming along, they're almost like taking dictation, I've heard. That's an interesting way that things can go. Professionals go, you go sit at your typewriter or word processor from 9 to 12 every day. Doesn't matter whether you have something to create or not. And some of us here know people who did that and produced incredible volumes of creative content. It's not something waiting for inspiration. Inspiration happens when you're ready. Beauty is nutrition for the nervous system. Art can objectify the shadow. With art, we are mining our unconscious. Helps us face ourselves and identify the healing needed to become both self-actualized and self-transcended. That's E. Cummings. That was E. Cummings' insistence that the artist is no other than he who unlearns what he has learned in order to know himself better. What a great quote.
A couple of things that really struck me. One is this quote that you read about creativity starts where logic stops. It really does feel to me that creativity is instinctual. Like it's not something that's thought out. It's something that comes from somewhere else, from nothing.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it different than everything else, really. Also, we're talking about different kinds of art. One kind that hasn't been mentioned is performance art. And there's something about that modality that is very enlivening. And improv is very creative. You have to let go of everything and just be with the situation rather than having thought it through, to really engage it. And then the other quote that you mentioned that really struck me is, our lives are art. I don't even know if that was a quote or just something that you said.
Our life is art.
Yeah. And
or can be.
I'm thinking about the spiritual path and how it is for some people who have had some kind of transformation go on where they're just passionate about life, whatever comes. It seems like that's their passion. And they're creative in relationship to God or the universe, what shows up each day, even maybe every moment. And for me, I'm mostly holding on or attached to things and not always by a long shot in touch with that kind of relationship to life. But it comes sometimes.
Yeah, my overarching theme of this is our life is art. I keep circling around to that because that is the big canvas, our life. So I'm going to briefly touch on poverty, limits, and constraint as aspects of creativity. Often creativity is a function of limits and constraints. There's limits and constraint to everything. And it can be a great fuel And the reason I mention that is because I have a show and tell about that. And when you don't have resources, it brings about a kind of ingenuity. You have to make something work. You can't buy the right thing to make it work exactly. So you have to do something or other creatively to make something work. And I have a very low grade version of this. I saw a pair of sneakers at a thrift store that I liked, but the coloration, these here, the tip of them was kind of graying. So I thought these fit nice. I like them. But because they gray, I got to do something about that. So I drew the black tip on those with a magic marker. So as to make these very cheap thrift store sneakers that happen to fit my size work. So this is an example of this thing about sometimes less is more. So there's this other aspect of restraint, limits to creativity, poverty, or lack of resources is a driver for creativity. It's an incredible driver historically. So much stuff has been invented out of necessity. William Blake invented a whole new medium for producing his art because it was so time consuming to produce otherwise. I read a quote here. The choice we make of how we dispose of our consciousness is the ultimate creative act. It renders the world what it is. It is therefore a moral act. It has consequences. How we dispose of our consciousness, what we pay attention to, where we put our attention. That is all you have to give in this world. That's all you have, your attention. From that, light can flow. That's Ian McGilchrist was that quote. Consciousness equals choosing what you pay attention to. If you want to screen share domains of creativity, singing, there's people who are well-trained operatic singers, and there's people who sing in the shower or sing around the house. I think that's great. Writing, fiction, journaling, poetry, morning pages. These are all aspects of writing that can be creative. The morning pages that people write. How can they write 2 pages out of nowhere in the morning? I've tried that and I'm not much of a writer. Acting that's so open-ended, like performance art. And then movies, filmmaking. Filmmaking is one of the most complex, elaborate, taking in so many different mediums, so many different types of artists. When the Greeks started doing plays, professional actors appeared. And there's a movie that I'm reminded of, a great movie, Maudie, and it's about this couple. They live somewhere in Canada near the coast, and the husband's a fisherman, and the wife wants to paint, and she paints, and the husband's angry at her. They live in a one-room log cabin, very basic sustenance existence. The husband gives the wife a very hard time, but she buys some paints and puts them out on the road. And in time, people start coming by, seeing her paintings and buying them. And eventually her art becomes a major source of income for her and her husband. And at the end of the movie, they show the couple in their cabin. They're old people. Wonderful movie, Maudie. So movies are incredible. Next, dancing, creating and doing. So many forms of dance. Some dancers, they hear music. Watching YouTubes of ballroom dancers is incredible. Sculpture, don't need to say anything about that. We've all seen incredible sculptures. Found art, that's a whole category of art. People who find things wherever and then arrange them in some way as either a sculpture or on a canvas. That's an art form. Paper arts, paper mache, that's one paper art. Cutting things out, paper airplanes. On YouTube, people doing things that are like the size of half a room somehow with paper. Glass arts, glass blowing and lamp working. Those are 2 different glass arts. And there may be more. I'm not a glass artist. You wouldn't believe such things could be done with glass. That's what I'll say. Pottery, there's a whole domain of art. Now it's like an art form. But think of the Indians. They made pots as practical things to store water and grains in, and they decorated the outsides of the pots. Like I decorate my name tag instead of just scrawling my name on there, or my sneakers that I showed you, our capacity for making the world more beautiful is limited by our imaginations. The way you arrange your room, the art in your house, so much potential. Anyway, pottery, jewelry making, that goes from the people you see at crafts fairs and at flea markets to the jewelers who made the various crown jewels of Europe and Russia. And I'm told the crown jewels in the Kremlin even dwarfs the crown jewels in the Tower of London. It's an incredibly broad range of creative possibility. Rings, pendants, earrings. Where have human beings not attempted to make something beautiful? Makeup. I mean, you can Google makeup and there's makeup competitions. I mean, you could see makeup in movies, the incredible things that makeup artists do with people, but there's makeup as a daily thing. Women spend years of their life applying makeup on their face. That's an important art form, isn't it? There's a lot more to it than you would imagine. Body art and tattoos. Look at how that's taken off in recent time. The Maoris were into it, and there's some Indian sects that tattooed themselves heavily, and now it's become a whole art form in our culture. Yeah, body art and tattoos. Hairstyles. It's kind of like an aesthetic thing for women throughout history. But wow, what people have done. Go to the Phoenix Museum of Art. They have a room of women's fashions that's incredible. It is really a stunning art form, women's fashions. Comedy, stand-up comedy, and writing jokes. That's really an art form. If you get into listening to that stuff, it's incredible. And I think stand-up comedians and trial lawyers are the smartest people in the world. You've got to be able to think on your feet. It's amazing. And that's an art form. Comedians are really serious about their work. I can't see the smiles up there. Clothing design, fashion, costume, cosplay, drag shows, t-shirts. Those are all forms of decorative art with clothing. You know, you have high fashion, as occurs in these art shows in Paris, to cosplay, which is where people wear costumes of various comic book artists. They go through a lot of trouble to create those things. Drag shows and the very creative, wild stuff that these people do. T-shirts. Look at all the incredible stuff that's been printed on T-shirts. There are places to make political statements, artistic statements, where the hand of man has ventured. Rock painting. That's become something that the elders in my building get together and do. Paint little rocks. And I'm amazed. They can paint very elaborate things on those rocks. Cooking. Now that's become a whole world. There's multiple TV channels about cooking. I could not have imagined that so much creativity could be done in cooking. And it's like really a big thing. Weaving and sewing. It's a little different than fashion. It kind of blends into it. But weaving, all the stuff that is woven, the different crocheting, what I call basket weaving, a form of weaving, blankets. Again, such a diversity of creative material has appeared in the world of weaving. Doodling. When I ran across it, I started doodling, and my doodles all turned into mandalas, which apparently Jung did. C.G. Jung painted mandalas as a form of therapy for himself. Utilitarian creativity. I showed you my shoes, but making almost anything. You might say that industrial design is part of utilitarian creativity. Everything that we use has been created originally by somebody and refined and refined and refined. Like silverware, there's so many styles of silverware. It's like an art form. It's all utilitarian creativity. It's just endless. Bookshelves. Are you going to build some beautiful bookshelves or bring in orange crates and stack them? Every aspect of life has this creative potential. Photography. So much of photography is just about how you frame what you see, what you omit, what you include. And we can do that in our choices. What impression food we include in our lives, and what impression food do we omit? And that's a choice. How we spend our consciousness, our presence and attention. What is it that feeds you, and what is it that costs you and your energy? That's really one of the most important places to look at our capacity for choice, for consciousness, is what we choose. Impression food, beside culinary food, the impression food and what we choose, and creativity as a form of impression food, where we make something out of nothing. Our whole life is this. We're born into this world not knowing what's going on, and until the day we die, we keep refining it. We keep learning more and refining the process. Architecture. Maybe we want to do cathedrals, which is a separate art form in architecture, but we all know, from log cabins to the World Trade Center to the Eiffel Tower. I'll say sand art is people who make incredible paintings with sand. Interior decorating, we know about. Incredible work done there. Mothering, that's, as I mentioned earlier, incredible area of necessary creativity. Okay, these are two cathedrals. This one we're seeing Justo, this guy that started building the cathedral and worked on it his whole life, dragging things back, paying for it all himself. Everybody thought he was crazy. And eventually people, year after year, saw this thing evolving. You can look this up in Justo's Cathedral. And this whole thing, eventually people got on board with him, started helping him build this thing. And he died in his 90s. It wasn't quite complete, but at that point, people were coming from all over the world. This was his clear passion to build a cathedral. These are some examples of it. And now we can go on to La Casa Sagrada. And this is Gaudi's incredible cathedral. It's the tallest cathedral in the world. It was started in 1883 and is scheduled to be finished in June of 2026. And that date has been pushed back for 100 years. No, for a few years now. The word gaudy, which means overly decorated, came from this guy's name. He took over this cathedral thing, redesigned it, started it, died, and other people have been finishing it according to his plans for 100 years. Okay, let's see, we can do land art. There's a whole genre of art called land art. People just take things that they find in the earth, rocks, whatever, and make designs out of them. And you can Google land sculpture and land art. This is my favorite art form because I think it's so exciting what people have done with land art. And some of this stuff is ephemeral. The tide comes in and some of these things disappear. Land art is also land sculpture. Some of these things remain. That's a whole area of art. There's a huge amount of work being done there. Most people don't know about it. A lot of it's just taking what occurs and what they can find around them and constructing something that excites them. And then there's graffiti art. This guy, Banksy, he's British, and he produces this, and it's graffiti, and it's political. He makes political statements with it. But we all know graffiti. If you lived in New York, there was years that there was a ton of graffiti on the subways. We see graffiti everywhere. Some people have taken it into an art form. Banksy is famous, world famous, for graffiti art. So I'm going to quickly go through the rest of them. Gardening, Dharma statements, industrial design, gaming design. People do all these games that kids do. That's an art form, gaming, making YouTube channels. People have really done some incredible things there. You know, with AI, it's a tricky thing because some of the stuff is sold as if it's real. And then there's people like E.J. Gold that use art in combination with their lyrics. Scientific experiment and research. People are born to do research. It's a passion that we have. The kind of world we have now is because people were consumed with the passion of understanding electricity, magnetism, all this stuff. Leadership, guidance, teaching. Clearly, you've had a good teacher in school. There's a great difference between somebody who just drags out facts and somebody who engages you with it. Psychic exploration like C.G. Jung. Law. I could explain law, how that's an art form. I'd have to explain some scientific studies about language and its effects on people and how we can, by choices of words, be influenced. And that's what we do with our identity. Our identity is a linguistic fiction. Thank you all.